In the bleak winter of 304 AD, in the Roman city of Emerita Augusta, now known as Merida, Spain, a 13-year-old girl walked resolutely toward her execution, her footsteps reverberating through the ancient marble hallways that had borne witness to countless deaths and brutalities. This execution, however, was no commonplace occurrence, nor was the child an ordinary victim. Her name was Eulalia, and the events that transpired during her final hours would leave an indelible mark on history, making her a haunting testament to the religious persecution faced by early Christians. At the zenith of its power, the Roman Empire unleashed its unrelenting brutality against this mere child, embodying the darkness of a regime threatened by the light of faith. 13 torches were lit for each year of her brief life, and in those shadows, a remarkable narrative would unfold, one that would challenge the very foundations of an empire and inspire countless souls for centuries thereafter. To comprehend Eulalia's story, we must first appreciate the unparalleled crisis that engulfed the Roman Empire at the dawn of the 4th century. Emperor Diocletian, who rose from humble beginnings to become one of Rome's most formidable rulers, faced a multitude of threats from within and outside the empire's borders. Barbarian invasions, an economic downturn, and political infighting threatened to unravel the very fabric of Roman society. In his fervent quest to restore Rome's former grandeur, Diocletian concluded that the empire's troubles sprang from a decline in venerating the traditional deities that once secured its greatness. The burgeoning Christian community, with its refusal to honor pagan gods or make sacrifices to the emperor's genius, represented, in his eyes, a malignant force eroding the empire's spiritual core. On February 24, 303 AD, Diocletian took his first drastic step against Christianity, issuing an edict that would ignite what historians would characterize as the Great Persecution, the most systematic and savage effort to eradicate Christianity from the Roman world. Churches were to be razed, sacred texts set ablaze, and Christian property seized. Those in positions of authority within the government and military were given a stark ultimatum: comply with the imperial religious demands or face total devastation. This edict spread rapidly across the empire, reaching the affluent city of Emerita Augusta, the capital of the Roman province of Lusitania, where it would tragically claim its youngest and most outspoken martyr. Emerita Augusta was no neglected provincial outpost. It was a dazzling center of Roman civilization in Hispania. Founded by Emperor Augustus for retired soldiers, the city was adorned with magnificent temples, an impressive amphitheater capable of seating 15,000 spectators, and sophisticated aqueduct systems that provided water to its lavish public baths. The elite resided in spacious villas embellished with intricate mosaics, while merchants from distant lands filled its marketplaces with exotic treasures. Christianity had surprisingly taken root here among the Romanized Hispanic aristocracy, spreading discreetly through homes where both masters and their slaves would gather in secret to share meals and the teachings of Christ. Within this marble-clad city, Eulalia was born around the year 290 AD to a wealthy family that secretly embraced the Christian faith. Historical accounts, primarily from the poet Prudenius, who wrote a century later, along with various hagiographic texts, depict her as a girl of notable privilege, yet with an extraordinary spiritual conviction. Her parents, whose names have faded into history, skillfully navigated the treacherous landscape of being covert Christians in a society where adherence to state-sanctioned religion was imperative. They provided Eulalia with an education that transcended mere classical literature. She was also taught the clandestine Christian texts that would form the backbone of her eventual confrontation with Roman authority. Eulalia was not just another child. She was described as extraordinarily gifted and fiercely independent. Ancient narratives highlight her keen intelligence and almost reckless bravery when it came to her beliefs. While most Christian children were taught to conceal their faith, Eulalia exhibited a boldness that was remarkable for her age, publicly rejecting the Roman deities and openly speaking about her Christianity, even in the face of dire repercussions. Her parents, acutely aware of the danger posed by their daughter's outspoken approach, sought to redirect her fervor towards private acts of devotion and charity among the city's impoverished population. When Diocletian's edict reached Emerita Augusta in the spring of 303 AD, the Christian community found itself grappling with a mix of dread and resignation. Many fled to the countryside, while others recanted their beliefs publicly yet clung to them in secret. Some prepared themselves for martyrdom. The local governor, known from tradition as Dacian, approached his mandate with systematic resolve, ordering the destruction of house churches and the apprehension of known Christian leaders. Citizens were required to perform public sacrifices and obtain certificates as proof of their devotion to the gods. For Eulalia's parents, the solution seemed straightforward: safeguard their dangerously assertive daughter by sending her away from the city until the turmoil subsided. Their villa, nestled in the countryside, surrounded by serene olive groves and vineyards, should have provided a sanctuary, allowing her the chance to practice her faith away from the prying eyes of imperial authorities. But they utterly underestimated Eulalia's resolve. To her, retreating to safety while her fellow Christians were persecuted was not an act of wisdom. It was an act of cowardice and betrayal against her core beliefs. Accounts suggest that she spent countless days in fervent prayer and fasting, wrestling with a decision that would seem incomprehensible to modern sensibilities: the intentional choice of a child to pursue her own martyrdom. On a frigid December evening, while the rest of her household slept, Eulalia slipped away from her villa accompanied by a single companion, traditionally identified as Julia, perhaps a servant or fellow young Christian. Together, the two girls traversed through the cold darkness, reaching Emerita Augusta at dawn, just as the city's temples began to greet the day. What followed would be recounted in various historical sources, each contributing layers of detail to Eulalia's remarkable act of defiance that shocked even the most hardened Roman officials accustomed to confronting religious fervor. Eulalia did not merely present herself to the authorities, but instead delivered a public denunciation of Roman religion that resonated throughout the forum and attracted a crowd of curious and horrified onlookers. Standing before Governor Dacian's tribunal, this 13-year-old girl, no taller than the soldiers around her, issued what amounted to a declaration of war against Rome's spiritual practices. Fragments of her speech, likely enhanced by later writers but compelling nonetheless, reveal the audacity of her claims. She denounced the Roman gods as demons, labeled their temples as dens of deception, and condemned the emperor as a minion of Satan. She particularly vilified Jupiter, mocking him as an adulterer and tyrant, and attacked the cult of the emperor as the epitome of human arrogance. Initially, the crowd viewed her boldness as mere childlike theatrics, but soon a chilling silence fell over them as it became clear that this was no jest. The girl was, through her words, signing her own death warrant. Governor Dacian's response underscores the complex psychology underpinning Roman persecution. Here was an official responsible for maintaining order and religious conformity, unprepared for the challenge posed by a child whose defiance threatened to mock the very authority he was sworn to uphold. Historical sources suggest he first attempted reason, appealing to her youth, her family's prominence, and the delights of life she was so willingly discarding. He offered her not only clemency but also potential rewards: a noble marriage, wealth, position, all in exchange for a simple act of sacrifice. Some accounts even indicate he suggested that she perform the act without any emotional investment, a compromise many Christians had chosen to make to preserve their lives. But Eulalia's unwavering response shattered any hopes for a peaceful resolution. In front of the assembled onlookers, she allegedly appended the altar, scattered the incense, and spat at the emperor's image, sacrilegious acts that, under Roman law, warranted immediate and severe consequences. Even in the face of such blatant defiance, Dacian hesitated. Executing a child from a prominent family posed significant political risks. Moreover, he knew well that martyrs often provoke more dissent than they quell. With a practical mindset, he opted to imprison Eulalia, perhaps hoping that a night behind bars would break her spirit or that her influential parents might intervene to secure her release. The prison where Eulalia spent what may have been her last night was emblematic of Roman judicial facilities, dark, fetid cells where the accused awaited their fates. However, rather than diminishing her resolve, confinement seemed to strengthen it. Christian sources assert that she spent her time in prayer and song, her voice echoing through the prison, uplifting other Christian inmates while unsettling the guards. By morning, word of her defiance rippled through the city, gathering crowds at the forum where her fate was to be determined. Dacian faced a dilemma: release her and appear weak, or execute her and ignite the fervor of martyrdom that could inspire even greater resistance among Christians. While historical accounts diverge on the precise details of what transpired next, all agree on the horror that followed. Dacian ordered that Eulalia be subjected to torture intended to force her into recantation, employing methods designed to break seasoned adult criminals upon a child's fragile body. The tradition of 13 distinct tortures, one for each year of her life, may indeed be symbolic. Yet the catalogue of her suffering recorded by ancient sources speaks to the genuine brutality of Roman torture practices. The aim was not merely punishment. It was to transform Eulalia's ordeal into a public spectacle designed to deter any similar insurrection. What Dacian failed to anticipate was that Eulalia would transmogrify this ritual of terror into something transcendent, a testament of faith that would echo far beyond the confines of her time. The torment began in accordance with standard Roman judicial protocol, starting with flogging, a punishment brutal enough to claim the life of a grown man, let alone a child. Sources detail that the implements evolved from leather whips to metal-tipped scourges, capable of tearing flesh apart. Yet witnesses reported that, rather than begging for mercy, Eulalia welcomed each agonizing blow, responding instead with prayers and hymns. The torturers, accustomed to broken pleas for clemency, were confounded. The intended spectacle began to shift. It transformed from a demonstration of imperial might to one reflecting a power that transcended mere physical suffering. As the tortures escalated, the stark desperation of the authorities became evident, revealing the peculiar dynamic that developed between both persecutor and victim. Iron hooks were employed to gouge at her sides, tortures traditionally reserved for the most egregious criminals. Burning torches were pressed against her open wounds, and the air filled with the acrid scent of charred flesh. Yet each subsequent act of brutality seemed to fortify Eulalia's defiance, further unsettling the gathering crowd. Reports suggest she taunted her torturers, questioning whether this constituted the best that their gods could muster. While others describe her maintaining an uncanny serenity, her lips murmuring constant prayers, even as her flesh bore the brunt of the systematic assault. The utilization of boiling oil and molten lead poured over her wounds marked an alarming departure from standard procedure punishments typically inflicted on slaves who had slain their masters or soldiers guilty of treachery. That such measures were unleashed upon a mere child suggests either extraordinary cruelty on Dacian's part or, more likely, a complete unraveling of conventional order. What began as a spectacle for amusement transformed into an unsettling display of suffering that left the crowd murmuring in distress. Witnesses recounted women weeping openly, while even seasoned soldiers averted their gazes, realizing that the execution was devolving into a public relations calamity, turning the intended victim into a symbol of resistance. Accounts depict a moment of pause during the torturous proceedings, whether a result of exhaustion among the tormentors or Dacian's desperate attempt to secure Eulalia's recantation. In that stillness, she is reported to have decried mortal authority without any plea for mercy delivering, instead a sermon on the impotence of earthly power in the face of divine truth. She spoke of resurrection, eternal life, and a kingdom founded not on the pillars of violence and fear but on love and sacrifice. Whether these words were ever spoken verbatim or later ascribed to her by Christian historians, they encapsulate the essence of her resistance, a profound inversion of Roman values that exalted dominion, honor, and physical supremacy above all else. The decision to end Eulalia's suffering through fire, to burn her alive, signified both an acknowledgement of failure and an attempt to restore order through the utmost brutality. The pyre was erected in the forum itself, a public assertion that resistance would be met with the most severe punishment. Yet even this final act of violence was transmuted by Christian tradition into a scene of transcendence. As the flames engulfed her, witnesses reported that a dove emerged from her mouth, symbolizing her soul's ascent to heaven. Snow is said to have fallen from a clear sky, blanketing her charred body in a mantle of white. Whether the elements of this narrative are grounded in historical fact or embellished by legend, they reflect the profound psychological impact of witnessing a child's execution, revealing humanity's deep-seated need to ascribe meaning to such senseless savagery. In the aftermath of Eulalia's martyrdom, the intended deterrent effect of her execution rapidly evaporated. Rather than instilling fear, her death prompted Christians to rise from their concealment, risking their lives to retrieve her body and ensure she received a proper burial. Her demise became an immediate focal point of veneration, with believers laying flowers and uttering prayers, despite strict prohibitions. Dacian's reports to Rome likely framed the execution as a success, emphasizing the elimination of a dangerous agitator, yet in stark contrast to his narrative. The reality was that Eulalia's martyrdom ignited a fervor that transcended local boundaries, becoming a rallying cry for Christian resistance across the empire. The metamorphosis of Eulalia from an executed criminal to a venerated saint began almost instantaneously after her death. Within mere days, accounts of her martyrdom circulated within the Christian community, each retelling layered with additional significance and miraculous anecdotes, solidifying her legacy as a beacon of faith in a time of relentless persecution. Eulalia's story is a testament not only to her remarkable courage but also a powerful reminder of the enduring struggle for belief, conviction, and identity in the face of overwhelming adversity.